How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about The Wrong Number by R.L. Stine. This is the fifth book in the Fear Street series, and this is from 1990. So yeah, I was looking around deciding which one to read next. I have a lot of these new Simon Pulse releases. A lot of the other Simon Pulse new releases are for some reason from like the 30s and 40s. I just finished reading that bind-up, The Beginning, with the first 4 books in it, and then I saw that this one was actually number 5, and I thought, might as well go on to book 5 in the series, stay in order, I guess. And overall, this is a fun book that's definitely more on the mystery side. You know, Fear Street has a pretty wide range. They're usually pretty grounded, but every now and then they'll be somewhat supernatural. They're a lot of horror, but also a lot of mystery too. And this one is definitely for the mystery fans out there. But it's a little bit different of a mystery because we're actually cued in to who the killer is relatively early on. I won't spoil it, but knowing who the killer is and just needing the proof, that's an interesting idea. A few other really cool things in here. This is a book about phones, but it's from the 90s, so we get a lot of cool retro tech, and in turn this one feels more 90s than your average Fear Street book. Also, the main characters are best friends. They have a pretty good dynamic where her friend is, you know, kind of spunky and out there, but ultimately winds up being pretty capable. I thought the main characters had a fun way about them. And it also leads to a really, really good climax, which is what a lot of people remember this book for. This really, really cool scene that takes place near the end. That's pretty cool. And also, this was the first Fear Street book to get a sequel. Later on, we would get The Wrong Number 2, and I really am hoping that either Simon Pulse puts out a release of that one, or maybe I get lucky and find it in a used bookstore, because I am really curious what happens to these characters next, so looking forward to getting The Wrong Number 2. But anyway, in order to talk about this book a little more, I'm going to talk a little bit about the plot. Now that being said, I won't do any major spoilers and I won't give away the ending or anything like that, but I do want to take a moment and talk a little bit about what happens and analyze it in a few places, but again, I won't spoil the ending. We open up with a bit of a prologue where we get from the killer's point of view, talking about how he has this plan and how he thinks he can get away with it and how people might get hurt. Like I said, this is more on the mystery side of Fear Street than it is on the horror side, but a few pages here and there, really not much, from the killer's point of view does add a threatening menace to it. But then after that, we get into our main characters, Dina and Jade. They're best friends. Like I said earlier, Dina's kind of the more normal one. She's your point of view character. Not, you know, too preppy, but more straight-laced than Jade is. And Jade is going to be, you know, the kind of out there person who wears bright clothing that shouldn't match but somehow does, and more interested in doing things that maybe they shouldn't. More on that in just a second. But we also get a third character here, and that's Chuck. Chuck is Dina's half-brother, and he got expelled from his last school and is now moving back here with his dad, trying to get a fresh start on their life. And I really do find this character interesting. Some people might find Chuck annoying, but I do think that I've seen this person before in real life a few times. There's lots of people in real life that you know are good people, but constantly make bad decisions. The book even says that to Dina, Chuck felt like he was two different people. The normal, happy, nice guy, but then he could flip and become the mean guy that would make bad decisions that would be detrimental to his life. And you really do get that. You get several people that in real life you see, you're like, you're not a bad person, but why do you keep doing this stuff that's clearly not good for you? And I've seen this before so many times, and I think that is a real strength in the Fear Street books, is that several of these characters that pop up are people that I'm like, I remember that guy from real life, or I knew a few people that would act like this. And yeah, it's just, man, some people that you know in real life really just need to get out of their own way, and it's hard to figure out what to do or how to help them. But yeah, Chuck's in a bad place. Anyway, I should also mention that before we get into the chapters proper, this version of the book has a little title card that says Fall 1990, which I'm sure wasn't in the original release, because why would you put a title card that just says now, you know? But they have to tell you that this is from the 90s because phones. So yeah, Dana's father actually works for the phone company, and in turn, she just got a spiffy new extension. Yeah, phones nowadays are so different, but basically, you know, you'd had the landline running through your house, and then you had like the main phone that was usually in like the living room or something, and then you'd usually get like an extension, another phone on the same line, and it was like, you know, your dad's office would have it, but she's got her own phone in her own room. Cool for the 90s. But it's also a high-tech phone that features things like memory, you know, speed dial, which nowadays we just call an address book, but it can remember people's number for you. Again, cool for the 90s, super commonplace today. Another feature it has is speakerphone, so it will, you know, the whole room can join into the call. Again, something that's super common nowadays. They do say that it does sound a little bit like you're in a well, and, well, this book was 1990, it's been about 33 years, and speakerphone nowadays almost works. It still does have a little bit of, yeah, a little bit of echoiness behind it, but yeah, so a cool phone for the 90s. But anyway, Jade, being the more daring one, says, hey, you have your own extension, we can call people in the privacy of your room, let's do some prank calls. And quite quickly, Jade gets Dina to call this boy she has a crush on, but because he doesn't know who's calling, you should be that flirtatious, secret admirer character and really pique his interest, but not tell him who you are. If you guys like this section of the novel, I would recommend checking out the, I think it's 1989 movie called Lisa, which is about a girl who does a secret admirer voice and gets herself in trouble. I think Fear Street fans might like the movie Lisa. But anyway, back on track. Eventually, after doing these prank calls for a couple days, Chuck hears them. Chuck picks up an extension in another room, hears them talking, and he wants in on the pranks now. And Chuck, being Chuck, is going to make poor decisions. He takes on the persona of the Phantom of Fear Street, a really cool name for someone who's just doing pranks, but he like threatens the guy that he got in a fight with on the first day of school, and then will call in a bomb threat to the local bowling alley, which the girls quite quickly say, that was a bad idea. And I do like, I think this was in the original text too, is they really do scold him for that and say, you shouldn't do that. And for real, you shouldn't, especially nowadays. Nowadays, you hear so many stories, and they almost always catch these kids. And it's usually just some young, dumb kid who just thought it would be funny and didn't really mean anything by it. But boy, for that stuff, they really throw the book at you nowadays. And it is always just some dumb kid making a joke, and it ruins his life. So, don't. Don't do this. But anyway, Chuck does these pranks, and why is he calling himself the Phantom of Fear Street? Well, that's because Chuck, who is new in town, is kind of getting in an argument with Dina and Jade, who are Fear Street locals. The locals obviously believe the tales of Fear Street, and Chuck says every city has its own little legends. They're always overhyped. They're never true. It's just a street. So, after arguing about it for a little while, Chuck gets the idea to call a random house on Fear Street and just dial in and see what's up and see if it's really as scary as they say. But of course, he picks the wrong number, hence the title of the book. The random house that they call at a random time, they just so happen to get a lady being murdered. That is a huge coincidence, but remember, young writers, coincidence can get you into a story. That makes it interesting. It's only when coincidence gets you out that it feels a little forced. So, by happenstance, they happen to hear a murder on the phone. So they all decide to drive out there instead of calling the police because, Chuck literally just made a bomb threat and they didn't want to get in trouble, so Chuck gets in his car and drives down there. For real though, you don't have to tell the police the whole story. Don't include the prank call part, just include the part where you argued about Fear Street and called up a house. But whatever, like I said, Chuck doesn't make the best decisions, and those decisions continue when they get down there. The lady's dead, the killer's still there, and Chuck defends himself against the killer with the murder weapon, getting his fingerprints on it. Like I said, Chuck does not make the best decisions, and even though they get away, Chuck becomes the prime suspect in the murder. And I will say from here on out, there are a few things that I thought would be a little frustrating, but luckily they get over them really quick. One, the girls do cooperate with the police a whole lot. It just doesn't work out. But I am glad they tried. And two, it's pretty obvious who the killer is. Like, I figured it out really quick. Luckily, the girls do too. After the audience figures it out, the girls eventually figure it out. It takes them a minute, but I am glad because the killer was obvious that the book does tip its hand before it goes on too long. And from there it becomes a game of proof. You know who did it, but how do you prove it, and how do you get Chuck off the hook? You want to save your half-brother, but how do you do that? And I really do like it plays into the fact that these are just high school girls and not detectives or anything. So they don't know what to do, and it's like, I guess we'll follow him around and try to snoop in this way. And they do take advantage of that. And like I said earlier, I really do like the dynamic of these characters. Jade in particular, the idea that she comes off as kind of a wacky younger girl, but when they're actually put in a tight spot, Jade's the first to come up with a plausible excuse and get them off the hook. So I really did like that idea of someone who's kind of wacky, but also is still capable. And a lot of the end of this book kind of reminds me of like an episode of Psych or something, but with different characters, And it was interesting to see these girls bite off more than they should. They're just high school girls, but now they have to go and be in pursuit of someone who they're pretty sure is a murderer. And I won't spoil too much of the ending, but some fun twists and turns, and it does lead to a fun climactic scene. For example, I really do like this cover where you see the killer coming into her house with an axe. It gets the point of the book across, even though this doesn't literally happen in the book. When the killer confronts them, it's a different setting with a much different weapon, and it's way cooler, and I really am glad the cover chose not to spoil it. You know, it lied to us a little bit, get the point across, but when we see the weapon that the killer does choose, good. This is one of those books that a lot of people just remember for that one scene because it's so cool and over the top. But yeah, a really good bit right there towards the end. So a fun ending, good characters. The phone thing inadvertently gives it a retro 90s feel. It's not my favorite book. Like I said, I'm a horror geek. I prefer the Fear Street books that are more scary. But I do appreciate a good mystery and knowing who the killer is, but, you know, that sort of different framework going about it. I thought it was pretty fun. So, yeah, it's not my favorite, but it still kept me engaged. I still read through it really fast. I still thought it was a cool book. So, overall, definitely recommend this, particularly to the Fear Street mystery fans. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Fear Street playlist. I've covered the first 4 books already, and I've also covered a few other ones and the movies. But if you want to see me talk about more Fear Street, I have a whole playlist for this right here. I really am hoping to add to it soon. I did finally manage to find the Fear Street Saga bind-up, so after I read through the regular ones, I'll try to get to that. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Fear Street playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.